Hey, thanks for joining me today. I'm so glad that you're here. Today we're going to be talking about why you have to tell your story and what that looks like. I was recently down at Walt Disney World and I had the opportunity to be able to share this talk with a great group down there at Epcot during one of the festivals that I was attending. And it was really interesting to hear the feedback of folks that came up afterwards in terms of how it impacted them, but really kind of gave them permission. So today I'm really hoping that you can walk with permission away from this video after listening to this to know how you can really step into being authentic and why you have to tell your story. So important. Before we go into the how and what and the takeaways from today, I would really love to unpack really what makes a great story, okay? Just kind of the components of a story. You love hearing when you embark on, or when you were a kid and you would sit down and with your parents and maybe it was bedtime. Nothing is greater than hearing those words. Let me tell you a story. One of the most powerful things that happened to me when I was embarking on my journey of being an entrepreneur and wanting to go from just like making money to helping people. Like I literally wanted to help people. That's why I'm doing these videos. I really want to help set people free into their true calling. Story was the most powerful way to do that. It was the most powerful vehicle to do that. But with that, you need to kind of understand so that you can tell your story well. The goal would be to really understand really what makes it easy to deliver. And I think that's what most people struggle with. It's like, dude, my story's ugly. It's like not even that like great. Why would anybody want to hear my story? And that's what I hear all the time. Why does anybody want to hear my story? So I get that, I understand that, and that can be frustrating, but nothing is better than let me tell you a story. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. There are ingredients to a story. All right, there's the setting, there's plots, there's characters, there's the story arc, you know, the beginning, the middle, the end, the climax. There's typically going to be conflict, and then there's the best part, which is like redemption, the glorification. We see this a lot as it plays out in movies. And it's a commonality. It's the thread of every great story is watching a person go from, and watch this now, you're going to start to see yourself in this story. But you're going to see a person that comes into the world, they find their identity, they sometimes get a major breakdown, they get called into a new opportunity, they resist that opportunity, they have friends that help them get there, they have a mentor that helps them get there, they then have a major conflict and something to overcome, they then got to jump over that hurdle, then go to the next part, and then the glorification, and they go back through that cycle again as a new person. Now what's really amazing is sometimes we do that once through life. Sometimes we make it to a certain part, but we don't get to the other parts. Sometimes when things get really sweet, we go through that entire process and then want to go through that entire process again. Hey, I'm a new person, but I want to go to the next level and I'm going to go through that whole thing and jump. It's like going through an obstacle course. Those make really compelling stories. So as you start to frame and think about how you would tell your own story, you need to understand how stories work, the architecture to them, how they matter. And what makes them matter, what makes them worth being where people want to sit and listen to them. I mean, you know what it's like to watch a sleeper movie where the story isn't that great. It looks great, the technicalities might be executed great, but if you don't have a great story, you're not going to keep people compelled. So I want to encourage you to really sit back for these next few minutes and understand what's going to make the components really amazing so that you can tell and share your story great. Any given time, online or whatever you're doing, in a written form. A couple great storytellers that we know, I mean, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Walt Disney, wonderful, right? Less about the writing. Let's say George Lucas writing, you know, Star Wars, etc. Great example of writing, like he wrote the story. But when you stop to think about telling the story, there's a difference between a person writing the story and a person telling the story. You and I have had a life, and that life is our story, whether we like it or not. But it's not as much us writing our story as much as us telling our story is what we're talking about today. Are we a storyteller? So great storytellers are way different than story writers. great storytellers, Walt Disney, being able to tell stories in a beautiful way, Pixar. If you look at all these great movie studios, I mean, there's just some wonderful storytellers. But I was really inspired by these storytellers because they had one key ingredient in order to tell the story. They had to have guts. They had to have courage in order to do that. So you, my friend, are looking at embarking on telling your story. And I understand that that takes guts and that takes courage. So I want to affirm you in that today. It takes guts to tell your story, and know that you're not alone in that. Every single time I go up on stage, shoot, whenever I film these videos, it still gives me a little bit of like a dry heave and a little lump in my throat. I got to tell my story. I got to be vulnerable. I've got to like drop the fig leaf. We talked about that one of the episodes. That takes guts, right? But let's talk a little bit about stories. And you might have components that you're about to hear in your own story. I know I have. There's been some drama in my life. We all like dramas. There's been some suspense, cliffhangers, thrillers, romance, comedy, horror, adventure. We all want to be wrapped up in that story. We all want to have a great story to tell, right? But truly the characters are what's key. You are the key character in your story. So the sooner that you can help people understand your story, literally personally, what you've gone through, that's one of the greatest attributes to the story, is you and your personal character. I would say this when it comes to storytelling. It's less about what's happened to you. It's more how you've interpreted what you did to get through it. Most people play the victim role. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Life sucks. So that's my story. But I want to teach you today to really how to leverage what has happened to you as one of the greatest assets that you could ever ask for to help this world. There are many characters that we see drawn, sketched, like if I drew a drawing for you today of a character, you'd be like, that character's cool, it looks great, great execution on the drawing, but I have no tie to that person until I know what their story is. You ever seen those cases where you're like seeing a brand new movie that's going to come out, it's a new animation, you're seeing these characters go by on a bus sign, or a bus drives by and it's on the side of a bus, and you're like, hey, that's kind of cool looking, I have no idea what that's about, but then you go see the movie, then every time you look at that character, you're like, oh, that thing made me cry, or you really connected with that. Well, in order to connect with characters, you got to know what their story is, their makeup is. So when it comes to you as a character, we really want to make sure that we help others understand the good, the bad, and the ugly. Most of the time when we're on social media, we're out there just looking at the highlight reels of everybody. And that can be very, very misleading. And quite honestly, it's not very genuine or authentic. So one of the greatest things that I want you to walk away with today is one of the things that I hold, put it in my back pocket, and I take with me everywhere that I go. This helps my relationships, my social interactions, and everybody when it comes to me starting to tell my story. And this is a very great way for you to learn how to step out without having to step up onto a stage. So what is a great way you can step out into telling story without having to step up onto a stage? And the stage could also be online, like boom, you're talking to millions of people, all of a sudden the whole world can see it. And that can be a little drop in the fig leaf kind of vulnerability. I get that. So here's the one thing that I use. When you get shut down and you don't have any idea where to start when it comes to telling your story, here's how I'd like you to do it. All I want you to do is when you talk with people, let's say we're at a party. I'm going to be at a party and I run into somebody I don't know. And you got to trust me. People go, no, you're the most outgoing person, and like you're always talking and you'll get along with anybody. Sure, but you know how much effort that takes me? Because typically, being wired as just a normal selfish human being, we always walk into a party and we're like, where's the food? How can I find a corner? And just kind of bow out and not have to talk to anybody. Very rarely do I find people are like, hey, I walk in and then they all just want to go nuts and talk to everybody. That's a very rare case. But for me, it's typically been, hey, I just want to maybe talk to one or two people and just kind of take it easy. And I don't like talking to a bunch of people. But when I'm in that case where I'm brand new, and I used to travel the world doing art events where I was sitting at VIP dinners every single night with people I've never met before. And I had to get to know them. I wanted them to understand my story, and I wanted to know their story as soon as possible. So that's how I started. I literally would say, example, hey, Bill, how you doing, man? Hey, so tell me your story. What are you about? And most of the time, some people go, I have no idea. I don't really have a story. And that's very telling. My goal for you at the end of this video today would be for you to be able to say and know with certainty that you have a story to tell, that you can actually walk away with that, say, you know what, I have a go-to that I can use to help enrich my relationships, but help other people gain a better understanding of who I am and be a better storyteller. So when I go up to a guy like Bill and I say, hey, Bill, what's your story? And he kind of unpacks it with me. I have a go-to story. I personally do. I've written it out before. I've talked about it so many times. Starting my business on a bike at 16, my parents splitting up when I was little, growing my business through my 20s and living in a warehouse and pouring every bit of money I had into websites and technology and helping scale my business. Growing my business, then learning, coming to meet my wife and then having children and starting a family and growing my other business into other businesses and publishing and mentoring and helping individuals and starting ministries and then helping AIDS orphans in South Africa. Just kind of like the elevator pitch of like how you can deliver your story with confidence of knowing that you have something to offer. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. It's not about just you saying, here's what's happened to me. But I want you today to be able to walk away with confidence saying that your story is your greatest asset about who you are as a person. But people minimize it and they don't think that their story matters. You could be working at a cubicle at a major corporation and thinking that nothing matters when it comes to your story. I have to disagree with that. Your greatest asset is your story, period. Not the amount of money that you have. Nothing else will heal the world and the people around you and affect the people around you more than your personal story. That is a big deal, a very, very big deal. So number one, realize your story is your greatest asset. Don't minimize that asset, exploit it. Here's why. Number two, you think that you don't have anything to offer. You think that what you've gone through doesn't matter. You think that all the stuff that is in your childhood, the good, the bad, the ugly, doesn't matter at all and isn't going to help anybody whatsoever. I got to disagree with you on that. The greatest mentors that I've had in my life were the ones that simply let me know that they had gone through certain things like I did and that I wasn't alone. Sometimes that just means like your story is somewhat matching up with somebody else's story and seeing that similarity. That's why we love movies so much, is when we see ourselves in that character living through them. That's why we connect with them. We're like, dude, that's me up there, man. They're reading my mail. I need to let you know that you're at the worst parts of you is your greatest asset. The stuff you're embarrassed about. The more I exposed and gently came out with the stuff that I had gone through that I wasn't proud of, where I failed, that was the greatest contribution to those that I was doing life with and those that I was helping. So important. So what you think is your greatest weakness is actually your greatest asset. If I was to show you a bunch of superheroes up, like all the Marvel characters and, Avengers, etc., you would be able to look at each one of those and know that they each have an individual strength. And this is one of the points I want you to realize today, is that each of us, you, myself, we each have a superhero power. And that is our story. That's what makes it so unique. What the Hulk has, Black Widow doesn't have. What Thor has, Iron Man doesn't have. They all have unique superhero powers. That's what makes their story unique. So I can't really compare myself to others and say, oh, they're like me, I'm like them. Not even close. You have no idea what they've gone through. You have no idea. They have no idea what you've gone through either. So for us to judge online and to do all that, you have no idea what these people are dealing with. So that's an absolute waste of energy and a waste of time. Your unique superhero power is your story. And your job is to expose that power. And that's what's going to help heal the world. If we each are a character, our story helps contribute to a bigger story. Now think about this. Imagine if you don't share your story. What does that mean? That means you're just another face in the crowd. But how meaningful is it if you were to sit down with some girlfriends or some guy friends and like people that you don't know, and you really just got really on the real and started asking people, Hey, what's your story? I would love to know one really cool thing that I don't know about you from your past. That's what makes us go deep on relationship and connection with others. That's what helps you if you're a storyteller through painting and art and creativity and ad agencies, etc. Tell these stories that connect at a very heart level. It'd be incredible. So let me ask you this question. What keeps us from sharing our story? Number one, being embarrassed. That's, again, kind of dropping the fig leaf, being exposed. I'm embarrassed. If I was to really share who I am, I could get shot down. Sure. But what's worst case scenario? Do you really need those people at the end of the day? And if they don't accept you for who you are, they're really probably not friends or good people to be hanging out with. But when you share your story out online and when you share your story with others and the people that are in your world, I love that fact because I love it when people know who I am. I haven't held back from the relationship. Hey, I've been 100% real of who I am to you. Now, some people take that, throw it on the ground, and stomp on it. That's going to happen. You'll be betrayed no matter what. You're not going to go through this life unscathed. You're going to get dirt and mud on you. It's going to happen. So don't act like you're going to just try to stay squeaky clean, because if you don't get messy, you're not going to have intimacy, period, with people. Number two, fear of rejection. What if they find out what they like? What if they find out what you're about and it's embarrassing and they're like, oh, dude, too much information. That could happen, but again, I'm like, who's the audience? Are these people that I ultimately really want to be hanging out with or not? So I could understand why that keeps you from, that could be a hurdle there. Totally get it. But I have found more, what I'm really looking for is those that are willing to do life with me and do it on the deep level. Number three, we don't feel equipped. You don't feel equipped. Like, dude, I don't know how to tell the story. Like, listen, if I stayed in that mode of I don't feel equipped, I don't believe, and I believe this to be the same of all leaders. I don't believe any of us ever feel dialed and perfectly equipped. We might be grown in strength and ability and confidence, but we're never like fully feeling like dialed, always equipped. Whenever I film these videos and whenever I step out and write, etc., I'm going to uncharted territory. So I actually think that's good because it keeps you vulnerable and it keeps you real and it keeps you humble and keeps the pride out of the picture. It helps you to stay stable in the standpoint of like, hey, I'm going to be real. I don't have this fully dialed. I'm always learning, and I'm going to continue to do better as I possibly can, and do better as much as I possibly can. And lastly, you don't feel qualified. And that's a way of minimizing, and so I wouldn't call it self-hate, but it's a way of you just kind of bullying yourself. We don't need outside bullies and people to beat us up verbally or whatever. We can just do that with the bully that we've created in our head. We can literally sit there and just badger ourselves, and that is a troubled area, and you really got to be careful about that. So just to review, being embarrassed, fear of rejection, we don't feel equipped, and we don't feel qualified. These are areas and ways that we don't tell our story. But I just want to tell you to break down those barriers, start to step out little by little, and just start sharing yourself with others. And as you meet new people, literally just ask them that story. Hey, I don't know you very much, but tell me, what's your story? And then if they ask you yours, just say, well, here's where I'm at. And that's the cool thing is, they can't rob you of your story. That's what's cool, because it actually happened to you. You can't say, dude, that's wrong. I don't agree with that yet. No, that's my story. That's your story. That's just what happens. That's the beautiful thing about story. Here's the thing. When it comes to selling, when it comes to building initiatives and online things where you're really trying to help people connect, right? I've seen literally people try to craft story, right? That's tough because it's fabricated. It's not genuine. It's fake. But when you have authentic, like a person literally telling, let's say you're trying to sell a car and they literally share this experience of what happened with them regarding this car and this vehicle and what they're trying to capture in terms of the messaging, and you literally tell somebody's story, that's gnarly, super gnarly. That carries way more weight, way more connection than anything. Your story authentically will trump anything that can be prefabricated or written and just come up with out of the air. So when we share, we've talked about what's going to keep us from sharing our story, but when we share our story, we help others. I was thinking about Walt Disney because he's a big inspiration to me, and Lucas and Spielberg and all these guys, right? But one of the things that I think about is imagine if he didn't tell a story. Imagine if these guys didn't tell their story and they didn't step into this authenticity. Oh, man, if they didn't get over those fears of feeling genuine, not feeling equipped, being embarrassed, fear of rejection, if they didn't overcome them, there wouldn't be the movies that we're seeing, the stories we're experiencing, the theme parks we're walking through, the characters that we're meeting, the movies that are being told. That wouldn't exist. You think about that for a minute. Those things would not exist had he not stepped in to living his story and telling those stories. Being a storyteller takes guts. It takes grit, and it takes saddling up when everything in the world around you says not to do it, to shut you down from being vulnerable. But by doing it, you help heal others around you, you provide hope to others, and you provide solutions for others. The sooner you can do that, share your failures, share your triumphs. Everybody wants what you have, right? There's always somebody looking at you like, I want what they have, but then you're looking at somebody else going, I want what they have. So you have something to offer. And what you have to offer is actually a solution. So when I help people consult on their brands and build their businesses, all I get to really quick is, what's your story? What have you overcome? And how do we expose that to show others that's what your main product is? It's incredible. So let's talk about a few ways to start sharing your story. All right, here we go. One, look for others that need help. I know it sounds crazy, but if I started my company's Noah U and helping mentoring other creatives because I just wanted to share with them how the obstacles that I've seen, the places that I've overcome, the victories that I had, and ways to help them get to the sweet spot as soon as possible. I wanted to be able to help others. I wouldn't be able to do that unless I actually shared my story. So I want to encourage you to do that. Share your story little by little, but finding people that actually have something that you possess, but they need. Find a need and fill it with your story. And then find a product that helps facilitate that. Number two, share how much you have overcome. The overcoming part is really what people want to learn. Dude, how did you navigate that? How did you get through that? That's gold. So ask people, like, what's your biggest blind spot or your biggest pain point right now in life? I ask that question pretty much to every person that I meet. Because everybody always wants to tell you the highlight reel and how great everything is, but really what I want to hear is, hey, what's your biggest pain point? What's your biggest challenge right now in life? And then you might be able to, they could say maybe 8 things, but you could weigh in on 3 that you've helped overcome through your story. You want to make a deep-rooted connection with somebody? Story is paramount. So I use this terminology all the time. Your life is a blank canvas. How will you paint it? And I used to beat myself up a lot about what had happened to me in my past. Like, my past was like, I wasn't really proud of it. Like, I didn't think it was something that I could really want to share with anybody. Anybody would really care about it. But when I sat down and I was sitting and praying with God and talking to my mentor said this. He goes, you cannot pick your past, but you can definitely paint your future. And by knowing that I can't do anything about my past, but I can paint my future, you can paint your future. You can paint your future. And if it is a book, you get to script and write and tell that story. You get a choice over how today is going to be. Today is going to be a page in your story. And you get to fill those chapters moving forward. You get to pick what that's going to look like. So my encouragement to you is to paint that picture. Why? Because each one of those pages is going to be a part of a much greater story. Your story goes as a chapter in the story of God's bigger plan and story of what He's writing with each and every one of us. So my hope would be that our stories together would be ones of great adventure, great conflict, overcoming, challenge, comedy, joy. But you know what? There's going to be the underbelly. There's going to be the rough parts, because that's always what makes a great story. You got to have that contrast. And If you're like me, you got plenty of it. Plenty contrast, all right? So my question to you is, as you fill these pages, as you start to tell your story, as you start to look at this piece that you're going to create, is this a painting that you're going to tuck away and hide from everybody because you're embarrassed about it? Or is it the type of thing where, hey, I'm not the best artist, but here's my piece. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm all about. And I want to share it with you. And that is exactly what we as artists go through, because artists go, man, this thing is terrible. But then you show it to like 10 people and a bunch of them interpret it differently and go, that's some of the most beautiful stuff I've ever seen. What you think is ugly about yourself is one of the greatest attributes and assets in your life to help somebody else. Unbelievable. So use it, all right? So nobody can take your story away from you. It is your greatest asset, and it's uniquely yours. Nobody has your story. Therefore, avoid comparing your story to others. I'll review with this as we close. We all have a unique story. Risk, courage, and failure are a must to storytelling. The sooner you share, the sooner you help others overcome. And by telling our stories, we become a part of a character of a much bigger story. And my hope is that you can turn your story from once upon a time to happily ever after. It goes from what could be to something that's super incredible that we get to read about, hear about. Take those risks and be an overcomer. I hope today's helped you a lot. Do me a favor, if you would, leave a comment down below. I would love to hear from you. My action step for you today is to answer this question in the comments. What is one tangible way that you are excited about how you can start sharing your story? Leave a comment down below and share this with others that you think this will benefit. Thanks for being here and doing life with me. Appreciate you watching these, and I hope you have an amazing, amazing day. See ya.